On my 35th birthday, my husband disappeared during dinner with my younger sister, claiming they were planning a surprise for me. 20 minutes later, I found them kissing in the restaurant parking garage. "Please don't ruin your own birthday," my sister whispered when she saw me. I walked back upstairs, cut the cake, and thanked everyone for coming. Then I asked the restaurant manager for the security footage and invited my parents to breakfast the next morning. The first thing I found in Unit 2140 wasn't money. It wasn't love letters. It wasn't a mattress or candles or whatever you're supposed to find in the storage unit your husband rented under a name that was half his mother's. It was my signature, 41 pages of it. A yellow legal pad, the cheap kind with the red margin line, sitting on top of a banker's box like he'd set it down for a second and gotten called away. Nora Keeler Vance. Nora Keeler Vance. Nora Keeler Vance. Page after page after page. The early ones were cramped and slow, the way your hand moves when you're copying something you don't understand yet. By page 15, he'd loosened up. By page 30, he'd found the rhythm, the little upward flick I put on the K, the way my E's collapse into a flat line when I'm in a hurry. I stood there in a 52-degree concrete box off Center Ridge Road with my breath fogging in front of my face, and I counted them. All 41. I needed a number. A number is a fact. And facts were the only things holding me upright that morning. Marcus had practiced my name for months. You don't do that for a birthday card. The manager's name was Dale Whitcomb, 61, a retired RTA mechanic who ran Ridgeway Self-Storage on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and clearly regretted every second of it. My attorney had sent him a letter on Monday. The rental agreement listed my home address. The auto pay came off an account with my name on it. Dale read that letter twice, looked at my driver's license, looked at the 6 months of statements I'd printed at the library because I didn't trust the printer in my own house anymore, and said, "I'm not a lawyer, ma'am. I know, but that's your address and that's your money." "Yes." He handed me a clipboard. "Sign the access log. Time in, time out. I'm going to stand right here where I can see you, and I'm going to write down everything you take out of there. And if anybody asks me, I'm going to tell them exactly that." I signed the log at 9:12 a.m. It's Exhibit A now. I've seen it enlarged on a screen in a room with a court reporter in it. My handwriting is shakier on that line than it's ever been in my life, and every lawyer who's looked at it has said the same thing. Good, that's real. Behind the door was a whole life. Still in boxes, a beige 3-seat sofa in factory plastic, a bed frame flat-packed and leaning against the wall, a 55-inch TV unopened, a 12-piece cookware set, 2 nightstands, a shower curtain still in the bag, gray with white stripes. I remember thinking, he hates stripes. Then I remember thinking, no, I hate stripes. He never told me what he liked. He just agreed with me for 10 years. It was an apartment, a whole apartment, bought and paid for and waiting, in a unit he'd been renting since July of 2024 under the name Marcus D. Ellery, because Ellery was his mother's maiden name, and he was never as clever as he thought he was. And in the back, stacked 3 high against the corrugated wall, banker's boxes. The order matters. If I'd opened the 3rd box first, I think I'd have driven straight to his office and done something that would have cost me the whole case. I opened the legal pad first, then the 1st box. Then I sat down on the concrete floor and did not get up for a while. I'd been an auditor for 11 years by then. That's the part people skip when they hear this story. They hear wife finds out husband is cheating, and they picture someone falling apart. And I did fall apart later on a Wednesday in a Giant Eagle parking lot over a song. But my job, 5 days a week, 45 hours if I'm honest, is reading other people's paperwork for a hospital system and finding the place where the numbers stop agreeing with each other. A charge posted twice. A modifier that doesn't match the note. A date of service on a Sunday for a clinic that closes Friday at 4. I don't get angry at documents. I just keep reading until they confess. Marcus knew that about me. He used to say it at parties like it was a charming little quirk. "Don't let Nora see your receipts." Everybody laughed. He laughed loudest. He'd married an auditor and then spent years assuming she'd never look. We met in 2015 at a wedding neither of us wanted to be at. He was 31, a loan officer at Lakeshore Federal Credit Union, in a suit that fit him properly, and he asked me what I did and then actually listened to the answer, which at the time felt like being handed something. He was good with my family in a way I wasn't. My mother died in 2019, and he handled the funeral home, the flowers, the death certificates, all of it, while I sat in a chair in my father's living room and stared at the carpet. My sister Bree still says it. Marcus was the only one of us who could function that week. My father is Hal Keeler, 78, 34 years as a lineman for the electric company, hands like tree bark, the kind of man who apologizes to a doctor for taking up their time. He had a stroke in March of 2023, left side of the brain, so it took the right side of his body and about 1/3 of his words. He got most of the words back. The hand never really came back. His signature after the stroke was a wobbling, disconnected thing, 3 peaks and a long drag, and he was embarrassed by it, so he stopped signing things in front of people. Guess who volunteered to drive him to his cardiology appointments every 3rd Thursday? Guess who I thanked? Out loud, more than once, in front of people. I need you to hold on to that, because it's the part that still wakes me up. And Rachel Munn, My roommate junior year at Kent State, my maid of honor, the person who drove 90 minutes at 1 a.m. in 2016 when I thought I was having a heart attack and it turned out to be a panic attack. Rachel, who worked as an escrow assistant and notary at Buckeye Land and Title in Rocky River, who had a commission number and a little embossing seal she kept in a felt bag in her purse, who once notarized my car title in a Panera because I was late for work. I'd known her for 19 years. 19. That first box was statements, not the ones I already had. I'd found those in September, and by the anniversary dinner I could have recited them. This was different paper. This was Lakeshore Federal, but the account number was wrong, and the product line at the top of the page said HELOC, Home Equity Line of Credit, $90,000, drawn against the house on Bonnie View, my house. The one I bought in 2013, 2 years before I ever met him, with money from my grandmother's life insurance and a down payment I saved by not going anywhere for 4 years. I want to tell you I understood immediately. I didn't. For about 90 seconds, I sat on that floor and built a story where this was fine, where we'd done a refinance I'd forgotten about, where I'd signed something at a kitchen table in a stack of things he handed me, where I was the one who'd made a mistake. That's what your brain does. It will build you a shelter out of anything, even a lie, even a bad one, because the alternative is standing out in the weather. Then I turned the page and there was the closing packet, and there was my signature on the mortgage, and it was the page 30 version. Confident, loose, the K-flick, good enough for a closing table, and underneath it, a notary block, a stamped impression, a commission number, Rachel A. Munn, Notary Public, State of Ohio. My commission expires 04/18/2027, certifying that Nora Keeler Vance personally appeared before her on September 12, 2024, and acknowledged the signing of the foregoing instrument as her free act and deed. September 12, 2024. I put my hand flat on the concrete because the room had started to tip, and I made myself say the date out loud in an empty storage unit like a crazy person, because I already knew. On September 12, 2024, I was in Indianapolis, 4 hours and change from Rocky River, Ohio, at the Midwest Revenue Integrity Conference at the JW Marriott on West Washington Street, in a breakout session on outpatient denials, wearing a badge on a lanyard that I had scanned into 3 separate rooms that day because they give you continuing education credits for it. She hadn't just signed a false certificate. She'd sworn, under her commission, that I stood in front of her and put my hand on a document that took $90,000 out of the only thing I've ever owned. That's not an affair. That's a felony with a seal on it. My hands started then. Not shaking exactly. That word's too small. They went numb from the fingertips down to the wrist, the way they do when you've been holding a grocery bag too long, and then they started jumping in a way I couldn't stop by looking at them. I dropped the packet twice, trying to get it back into the box. Dale Whitcomb, to his credit, stood exactly where he'd said he would and did not say a word. I told myself, standing up, that there was still an explanation, that a HELOC gets used for something. A roof, a business, a stupid boat. That this could still be unwound with a lawyer and a very bad 6 months. Then I opened the second box. The second box was mail. Not our mail. Loose envelopes. Some opened with a knife, some torn, rubber banded into bundles by name, and the name on the top bundle was Harold J. Keeler, 2211 Worcester Pike, my father's address. I sat back down. I went through every piece of it right there on the floor with my hands doing that jumping thing. A statement from his pension, 2 Medicare summary notices, and a letter from Sandalwood Financial Group dated July, addressed to Harold J. Keeler, thanking him for beginning the process on a reverse mortgage. My father did not have a reverse mortgage. My father would sooner have eaten the deed than borrow against that house. He'd paid it off in 2011, and he had told me about it, told everyone about it, the way other men talk about a hole-in-one. Underneath that letter was a document with a blue backing sheet, a durable power of attorney, Harold J. Keeler, Principal, Marcus A. Vance, attorney in fact, dated June 6, 2025, signed with 3 shaking peaks and a long drag, which is either my father's actual hand or a very good imitation of it. I still don't know, and the fact that I don't know is its own kind of wound. Witnessed by 2 people. One was a name I didn't recognize. The other one was mine, notarized by Rachel A. Munn. I made it to the roll-up door before I was sick. Dale Whitcomb got me a bottle of water out of the office fridge and a folding chair, and he said, in the flattest, kindest voice I have ever heard, "Do you want me to call somebody? Or do you want me to write down what time you got sick? Because I think you might need that later." I said both. He wrote it down. 10:47 a.m. It's in the log. It's Exhibit A, page 2. There was a third box. I didn't open it that day. I want to be honest about that, because people always assume I was some kind of avenging machine from the first second. I wasn't. I looked at that third box for maybe a full minute, and then I put it in the trunk of my Honda Accord with the other 2, and I drove to my attorney's office in Westlake with a storage unit's worth of felony in my back seat and the radio off, going exactly the speed limit, like a woman transporting nitroglycerin. Gil Sandoval is my sister's husband. 22 years doing family law in Cuyahoga County, most of it high conflict custody, and he has the the specific weariness of a man who has watched adults do their absolute worst to each other. 22 years doing family law in Cuyahoga County, most of it high conflict custody. And he has the specific weariness of a man who has watched adults do their absolute worst to each other in front of a magistrate. He looked in the boxes for 11 minutes without saying anything. Then he closed the flap on the second one, sat back and said, "Nora, I have to stop being your lawyer for a second. Okay, this isn't a divorce. I mean, it is, eventually, and it's going to be an ugly one. But this," he put 2 fingers on the box with my father's mail in it, "this is a criminal case and it isn't yours. Your dad's the victim on this one. And mail? That's federal. What do? You do nothing. Today, right now, you do nothing. Because everything you do from here either builds the case or burns it." He pulled a legal pad toward him, a yellow one, and I had to look at the wall for a second. "Who else has touched these boxes?" "Dale Whitcomb, the manager." He logged it. "Did you take anything out and put it back?" "I dropped a closing packet twice." "Did you take anything to your car that wasn't in a box?" I told him about the legal pad. He asked me if I'd written on it. I said no. He asked me if I was sure, and I said yes. And he said good. And then he said the sentence that would come back and put its hands around my throat 8 days later. "The problem is you had lawful access to the unit, but not necessarily to everything in it. If any of this belongs to a third party, we've got a chain of custody argument I don't want to have." I said, "A third party?" He said, "Rachel, because in that second box under my father's mail, there was a bound notary journal with a green cover and a brass embosser in a felt bag." I told myself I'd done the right thing bringing it to him. I told myself a lot of things that week. Gil called the Cuyahoga County Sheriff's Office at 2:15 that afternoon and asked for the Financial Crimes Unit by name, which I later learned was the most useful thing anyone did. Detective Karen Iwasaki called me back the next morning at 8:04, 22 years, 11 of them in financial crimes. She has a voice like a school nurse and the patience of geology, and the first thing she said to me was, "Ms. Keeler-Vance, I'm going to ask you a lot of questions that are going to sound like I don't believe you. I want you to understand up front that's not what's happening. I have to build this so a defense attorney can't take it apart, okay? Okay? Second thing, do not contact your husband about any of this. Do not contact Ms. Munn. Do not post anything. Do not tell your father yet. He's 78 and somebody's taking out a mortgage on his house. I know. And the second your dad knows, he's going to call your husband, because that's who's been driving him to the doctor. And then we lose everything." She let that sit. "I'm sorry, that was blunt." "No," I said. "That's the first true thing anybody said to me in 3 days." I told myself I could hold that line. He hadn't been home since the 11th. His mother put him out after 2 nights, and he'd been at Rachel's since, which I knew because Gil knew, and because a man who wants his half of a house does not go quiet. That was Wednesday. On Saturday, I drove out to Worcester Pike to check on my father because it was the 3rd Saturday and that's what I do, and there was a lockbox on his front door. The little gray realtor kind, combination dial, screwed into the storm door frame. I sat in his driveway with the engine running and felt my chest go hollow. Then I walked up the steps and put my hand on it like an idiot, like touching it would tell me something. And my dad opened the door in his cardigan and said, "There's my girl." And behind him on the kitchen table there was a stack of glossy paper with a photograph of his house on it. I said, "Dad, are you selling the house?" And he said, with total, uncomplicated warmth, "Well, honey, Marcus said you two talked about it." I have replayed that sentence more times than I can count, and what gets me is not the lie. It's the "well, honey." It's the way he said it like he was reassuring me. My father thought he was the one delivering comfortable news. I sat down at his kitchen table and I did what Karen Iwasaki had asked me to do, which was nothing. Do you know how hard that is? To sit across from your own father with a felony sitting between you in a glossy trifold and ask him easy questions in a light voice. Marcus had told him the house was too much, that the taxes in Bay Village had gotten out of hand, that the steps were a fall risk, that there was a place in Avon with a nurse on site and a wood shop, and that I was worried, that I cried about it, that I just couldn't be the one to bring it up because it would break my heart. He used me, not my signature, me. He built a version of me that was too fragile to have the conversation, handed it to my father, and then stood behind it. "He's been real good about it," my dad said. "Handles everything. I just sign where he puts the little sticker. Where he puts the little sticker." I asked when. He said the fella from the title company had come out to the house twice. Once in June, once at the end of July. A young lady came the second time. Blonde, he said. Very polite. Brought a stamp. I asked if he remembered signing a power of attorney. He said, "A what?" I got out to my car and I called Detective Iwasaki from the end of his street with the heater on full and my hands doing that thing again, and she picked up on a Saturday. "There's a lockbox on his door," I said. "It's listed. There's a Karen, they're selling my father's house. There was a pause, then a keyboard. What's the address? I gave it to her. More keyboard. Okay, she said. I need you to hear this, and I need you to not drive anywhere after I say it. Another pause. It's not listed. It's already under contract. It went pending on the 16th. That's 2 days ago. Yes. How does a house go under contract in 4 days? It doesn't, she said. Not honestly. Somebody had a buyer before it ever hit the market, so I tried to fix it myself. In fairness to me, I'd already learned what happens when you go through the front door. I'd called Lakeshore Federal about the HELOC and gotten a very nice young man named Tyler who said the account was flagged, and the specialist who handled flagged accounts was out until the 21st. I'd gone into the Rocky River branch in person, and when I said, I am the account holder, the teller looked at her screen a long time and then said, Ma'am, are you able to come back with your husband? I had called the Bay Village Police non-emergency line and gotten a sergeant who listened for 6 minutes and told me it sounded like a civil matter. He wasn't cruel. He just could not hear the difference between a woman who was angry about money and a woman describing a forgery ring, and I have thought a lot since about how many of us get sorted into the first pile. So on Monday the 20th, I drove to Buckeye Land and Title in Rocky River, walked in the front door, and asked to speak to a manager about a transaction involving my father's property. I did not ask for Rachel. That's on the record. I never once tried to see her. The escrow officer who came out to the lobby was named Meredith Chun, 19 years in Title, the kind of person who has a cardigan on the back of her chair in July. She took me into a conference room, which I did not expect, and she listened, which I really did not expect. And about 90 seconds in, she stopped taking notes and just looked at me. You're saying you didn't appear before our notary on September 12th. I was in Indianapolis. I can prove it with a hotel folio and a badge scan. She was quiet for a second. Then, I'm going to have to stop this conversation, and I need you to understand it's not because I don't believe you. It's because if what you're telling me is true, I have an obligation to our underwriter, and I can't have you telling me anything else until our counsel is on the line. Then she said, don't come back into this building unless a detective walks you in. Not because of you. Because if you're in here alone before this is resolved, someone will say you influenced a witness. She walked me out herself. At the door, she said very quietly, September 12th, you're sure? I'm sure. Okay, she said. I found out later in a deposition that Meredith Chun went back upstairs, pulled the electronic notary journal, and told no one in that office for 3 days. She just printed things quietly and drove the folder to her attorney. Some people are good in a way that costs them something. Her name is in this story on purpose. Marcus's counterattack landed on Wednesday the 22nd. At 4:40 p.m., I got a call from a number I didn't know. A deputy at the Rocky River station, very professional, letting me know that a report had been filed naming me and that if I wanted to give a statement, I could come in and no, I wasn't under arrest. The report said I had broken into a storage unit that did not belong to me and removed property belonging to a third party. The third party was Rachel Munn. The property was a notary journal and an official seal, which I did not know at the time isn't ordinary personal property in Ohio. A notary journal is closer to a public record. He hadn't accused me of stealing money. He'd accused me of stealing the evidence. That's the part where I finally understood who I'd been married to. Because that's not a panic move. That's a chess move. He took the single most damning object in that unit and reframed it as something I'd stolen so that when it came out, it would come out dirty. The next morning, Thursday the 23rd, 2 more things happened before 10 a.m. At 8:15, I got an email from Lakeshore Federal. My checking, savings, and direct deposit accounts were restricted pending internal review, not frozen by a court. Frozen by the credit union because I was a named borrower on a loan that was now flagged for suspected fraud, and until they sorted out which side of the fraud I was on, my money was theirs. I had $211 in an account at a different bank that I'd opened in September on Gil's advice, and a mortgage payment due on the 1st. At 9:35, a process server found me in the parking lot at work. Petition for a civil stalking protection order. Rachel A. Munn, petitioner. Nora Keeler Vance, respondent. Temporary order granted ex parte that morning. Full hearing set for Friday, October 31st at 1:30 p.m., courtroom 4C. The affidavit said I had been surveilling her, that I had come to her workplace, that I had entered a storage facility to obtain her personal property, that I had made veiled threats at a family dinner on October 11th in front of witnesses. You should probably go check that storage unit before I do. I'd said it feeling like a queen. On paper, in 11-point Times New Roman, next to the word threats, it read like something else entirely. I sat in my car in the lot at work with that packet on the passenger seat, and I could not make my lungs go all the way down. Not crying, just the top third of a breath over and over like a machine with a piece missing. My vision did the tunnel thing at the edges. I put my forehead on the steering wheel, and I counted the little stitches on the leather, and I got to 60 before it let go. Here's what I understood, sitting there. I had done every single thing right, and I was losing. I had evidence. I had a detective. I had an attorney and an escrow officer and a storage manager with a clipboard. And in the space of 9 days, the man who forged my name onto $90,000 of my own house had made me the defendant, taken my money, and put my father's house under contract with a stranger. Because that's how it works. The system is not built to catch a man who fills out the forms correctly. It's built to process forms. I called Gil. He said the words I have come to hate most in the English language, which are, "This is actually not unusual." Then he told me about the closing. He'd gotten it that morning from the sheriff's office, who'd gotten it from the Title Underwriters Council. Meredith Chun's folder had finally detonated somewhere above her pay grade. The sale of 2211 Worcester Pike was set to close Friday, October 31st at 10 a.m. Cash Buyer, an LLC, registered in Ohio in May, with a statutory agent address that was a UPS store in Middleburg Heights. Proceeds: $184,000 and change, to be wired at close per written instruction to an account at a bank in Nevada, signed by Marcus A. Vance as attorney in fact for Harold J. Keeler. Wire goes out at 10. Protection order hearing at 1:30. Same day. It was 6:40 on Thursday evening when I hung up. I had 15 hours and 20 minutes. I'd like to tell you I made a plan. What actually happened is I sat on the floor of my kitchen with my back against the dishwasher and shook for about 20 minutes, and my sister Bree let herself in with the spare key and sat down on the floor next to me and didn't say anything, and at some point she got up and made toast and I ate it because she put it in my hand. Then I got up and I did the only thing I have ever been good at. I read the paperwork. I went to the dining room table and I laid it all out. Everything from the boxes, everything from Gil, everything I'd printed, and I stopped thinking like a wife and started thinking like an auditor. Because here's the thing about a fraud built out of forged documents. Every forged document is a claim about the physical world. It says this person was in this place on this day and moved their hand this way. And the physical world keeps its own records, and they do not coordinate with each other, and they do not lie for anybody. I had 3 claims to break. September 12th, 2024, the HELOC closing. Rachel's certificate says I personally appeared before her in Cuyahoga County. I opened my email and searched my own outbox. At 2:41 p.m. that day, I had sent a message to a coworker from the JW Marriott's guest wireless with an attached photo of a slide about denial appeal timelines. The header had an IP. At 12:06 p.m., I'd bought a salad at a cafe inside the convention center on a Visa card, and the transaction posted with the merchant's Indianapolis address. My Easy Pass had me through the Ohio Turnpike westbound at 7:52 a.m. on the 11th and eastbound at 4:19 p.m. on the 13th. The conference had scanned my badge into 3 sessions with timestamps, and when I emailed the association's continuing education administrator that night at 11:15 p.m., a woman named Priya Raghunathan, who I have never met and who answered me in 19 minutes on a Thursday, she sent back a PDF attendance transcript with my member ID, the session codes, and the scan times. 19 minutes. A stranger. Sometimes the world is unbearably good to you at exactly the moment you need it. June 6th, 2025. The power of attorney. 2 witnesses. One of them me. I was at work. Badge access at the hospital's administrative building logs every door. I emailed my director at 11:40 p.m., and she called me at 6:15 the next morning and said security could pull the report, but it would take a day. And I said I didn't have a day, and she said, then I'll go stand next to the guy while he does it. The other witness name was Curtis Lyle. I searched it. Marcus's coworker at Lakeshore, a junior loan processor, 26 years old, whose wife I'd sat next to at a Christmas party in 2023, July 30th, 2025. The Sandalwood reverse mortgage letter, addressed to my father, in a box in a storage unit rented under a false name. That one wasn't a signature problem. That was mail, in a container, in a facility, with a keypad, and that's the piece that broke it open. At 12:40 in the morning, I called Dale Whitcomb's cell phone, which he had written on the back of a Ridgeway business card, and pushed across the counter to me with the words, "In case somebody gives you trouble about that log." He answered on the 4th ring, and I apologized, and he said, "It's fine, I'm up, my knee's bad." I asked him whether the gate kept records. He said, "Every code punch, every time. Unit number, time in, time out, going back 3 years. It's not even a security thing, it's for the insurance." I asked if he could pull Unit 2140. He said, "I can pull it. I'm not giving it to you, though. You know that. I know. I'll give it to the detective," he said. "You have her call me at 7 when I open." Then he said, "Ma'am, for what it's worth." He came in on a Sunday in September with a woman, and they were in there 40 minutes. I was up here changing a latch on 3100. Office is closed Sundays, but the gate works. I remember thinking, who moves furniture in on a Sunday and doesn't move anything in? I sat in the dark at my dining room table and I wrote it down. I sent everything to Detective Iwasaki at 1:58 a.m. in one email with 16 attachments and a numbered index, because I am who I am. Subject line, timeline, please read index first. She replied at 5:31 a.m. Nora, don't go to the closing. Let me handle it. I read that at 5:33. At 5:34, I got in the shower. I want to be clear that I did not go there to make a scene. I went because my father's name was on that transaction, and I did not trust one more room to be handled without me in it. Buckeye Land and Title, 9:40 a.m., Halloween. There was a plastic skeleton taped to the reception desk with a little sign that said, Boo Kai. I sat in the lobby in a gray sweater sweater with a folder on my knees, and my heart going like a bird in a box. Detective Iwasaki was already there. So was a man I'd never met, mid-40s, flat gray suit, a badge on a chain, who introduced himself as Daniel Boyd, U.S. Postal Inspector, 14 years, and shook my hand like he was being careful not to break it. "Mail's what makes it mine," he said, when I asked why the federal government cared about a house in Bay Village. 43 pieces of your dad's mail in a container he doesn't own. That's not a divorce, ma'am. That's a scheme. Meredith Chun came down at 9:47 with her cardigan on. She looked at me and did not smile, which was correct, and she said to Iwasaki, "Wires held." I put the stop in at 9:41. Underwriters Council is on the phone upstairs and nothing is moving today. At 9:56, Marcus walked in, navy quarter zip, folder under his arm. That easy walk he has, the one that made every waitress in Cuyahoga County like him. He was mid-sentence with the receptionist about parking when he saw me. I watched it happen. I want to describe it properly because I only got to see it once. His face did not go pale, and he did not stammer. What happened was smaller and worse. The warmth switched off. Just off, like a room when someone hits the wrong panel. For about 2 seconds, I was looking at a stranger's face with my husband's bones under it, and then the warmth came back on, and he said, "Hey, Nora, whatever they've told you." Iwasaki stepped in front of me and said his name and her title, and he stopped talking, and he never said another word to me again. Not that day. Not once. Since. The last complete sentence my husband of 10 years ever spoke to me was, "Whatever they've told you." He wasn't arrested there. That's television. He handed over the folder, gave an address, and drove away. And I sat in a title company lobby next to a plastic skeleton and shook for 10 straight minutes. Curtis Lyle lasted about an hour, sole member of the LLC that was buying my father's house, the straw buyer for a hard money lender in Solon, who believed he was funding a flip. Boyd and Iwasaki went to his apartment in Lakewood at 11:20, and by 12:35 he'd given a recorded statement. He said Marcus told him it was a family transaction. He said he'd signed as a witness on the power of attorney in the Lakeshore break room in June without ever meeting my father. He said Marcus told him the wife, me, had already signed at home. He said he'd thought it was weird. He said Marcus had gotten him the job. The protection order hearing was at 1:30 in courtroom 4C. Rachel didn't come. Her attorney appeared and moved to withdraw the petition, and the magistrate, a woman named Andrea Pelletier, who has been on that bench since 2011, looked at the file for a long moment and said, "The petition is dismissed. I'll note for the record that a protection order is not a litigation tool. Counsel, I trust you'll convey that." Then she looked at me over her glasses and said, "Ms. Keeler-Vance, you're free to go." I made it into the hallway before my knees went. Meredith Chun's folder had the thing that finished it. Buckeye kept an electronic journal. Every notarization logged, time-stamped, with the ID method the notary certified. Rachel's entry for September 12, 2024 was logged at 2:14 p.m. Signer, Nora Keeler-Vance. Identification, personally known to notary. At 2:14 p.m. that day, I was 4 hours away in a ballroom in Indianapolis with a badge scan to prove it, and there is no version of the world where both of those things are true. She'd logged 11 others that year for Marcus's borrowers. 6 of them didn't hold up either. Paula Nyquist, Notary Enforcement, Ohio Secretary of State's office, opened a file in November. Rachel's commission was revoked in February. Buckeye fired her in the first week of December, and the underwriter did what underwriters do, which is sue everyone in the room. In April, she pleaded guilty to tampering with records and complicity to forgery. 18 months of community control, 200 hours, restitution, and a commission she is never getting back in this state. She sat 4 feet from me in that courtroom and never once turned her head. 19 years, she would not turn her head. The third box, the one I never opened, had a folder in it labeled Alvarez, D. Denise. Alvarez was engaged to Marcus in 2014. She lost a condo in Parma Heights to a signature she says she never made. She never filed a police report because Marcus's mother came to her apartment with 2 cashier's checks totaling $31,000 and asked her, crying, not to ruin a young man's life over a mistake. Joyce Vance is 72. She testified anyway. She sat in that grand jury room and told them about the checks and about her maiden name on a phone account, and she has not spoken to her son since. She sends me a card at Christmas. I don't know what to do with them. I keep them in a drawer. Marcus was arrested on November 12th at the Rocky River branch of Lakeshore Federal, in front of everyone, which I did not ask for and did not enjoy as much as I thought I would. 21 counts: forgery, identity fraud, telecommunications fraud, theft from a person in a protected class, which in Ohio is what they call it when the victim is 65 or older, and which is why the number in front of the judge was so much much bigger than the money. The U.S. Attorney's office let the state take it. He pleaded in June. 6 years. Restitution of $106,400, which he will never pay, and everyone in that room knew it. His allocution was 90 seconds long. He said he had made financial decisions under pressure. He apologized to the court. He did not say my father's name. The report Marcus filed against me was closed in December. Unfounded. The HELOC was voided. 90 seconds long. He said he had made financial decisions under pressure. He apologized to the court. He did not say my father's name. The report Marcus filed against me was closed in December. Unfounded. The HELOC was voided. The title insurance covered what it covered, and Lakeshore ate the rest and gave me back my accounts with a letter that used the word inconvenience, one time too many. The hardest part of this whole story took 9 minutes and happened at a kitchen table on Worcester Pike. I told my dad on a Sunday, with Bree there, because Iwasaki said it was time. I put it in the smallest words I had. He listened the way he listens, with his good hand flat on the table. And when I finished, he didn't get angry and he didn't cry. He said I let him in the house. That's it. That's all he said. For about a minute and a half. And then this 78-year-old man who climbed poles in ice storms for 34 years put his head down on his own kitchen table and said he was sorry to me, and I have never in my life wanted so badly to set a human being on fire. 14 months later, my father still lives at 2211 Worcester Pike. We put a rail on the back steps. He hates it and uses it every single day. I sold the house on Bonnie View in the spring, which surprised people. It was mine. I won it. I could have stayed, but I'd stopped being able to walk past the dining room table. I work 4 days a week now instead of 5. On the 5th, I sit in a windowless room in the county's Economic Crimes Unit and read documents for the elder fraud caseload, powers of attorney, deeds, closing packets, looking for the place where the paperwork stops agreeing with itself. They pay me almost nothing. I have found 9 of them in a year. Every one of those 9 was somebody's Marcus, a son, a nephew, a very helpful neighbor who drove somebody to their appointments. People ask me if I saw it coming. They always want the red flag, the tell, the one thing they can check for in their own house tonight so they can sleep. I don't have one for them. I have a legal pad. I kept a photocopy of page 1, just the one page. Karen let me have it after the plea. Here's what I look at. When I look at it, he practiced my name for months and he never once got it right. The loops are too even. The spacing is too kind. He wrote Nora Keeler Vance 400 times and never learned that I stopped closing my A's in 2009 because he'd never actually watched me sign anything. He'd only ever watched me hand him the pen. 10 years next to me, and he was still just copying. The last thing I ever signed with that name was the divorce decree. I've been Nora Keeler ever since. It fits better. It always did.